All light, protection, and blessings to you, Sagittarius. There is something very unique about your energy right now. And honestly, most people around you don't fully understand it. Because when people look at Sagittarius, they see freedom. They see adventure. They see optimism. They see courage. But what many people fail to notice is what happens when a Sagittarius feels stuck for too long. Something inside begins to stir. Something begins to feel restless. And that is exactly what appears in your reading now. The interesting thing is that this restlessness is not appearing because your life is bad. Quite the opposite. The reading shows a Sagittarius who has accomplished more than they sometimes give themselves credit for. But suddenly a question begins appearing. Can I go further? And honestly, that question changes everything, because there are people who spend their entire lives accepting limitations that were never truly theirs. The energy surrounding you suggests that you are no longer willing to do that. There is another fascinating dynamic appearing. The reading shows some people around you who genuinely love you, people who care about you, people who want the best for you, but they do not fully understand the size of your dreams. And the important thing is this: they are not villains, they are not jealous, they are not trying to hold you back. They simply see life differently. Some people see security, you see possibility. Some people see stability, you see expansion. Some people reach a point where they think, this is enough. But the Sagittarian spirit rarely stops there, because your soul is always curious about what exists beyond the next horizon. And honestly, that curiosity is becoming stronger now. The reading shows you standing between two worlds. One side wants to preserve what already exists. The other side wants growth, exploration, discovery, expansion, new experiences, new opportunities, new chapters. And this inner tension becomes impossible to ignore. There is a very important spiritual message here. This feeling is not empty ambition. The reading makes that extremely clear. Because ambition seeks achievement, a calling seeks fulfillment. And what appears here feels much more like a calling, as if part of your soul knows there are chapters of your story that have not yet been written, as if something meaningful is waiting beyond an important decision. There is another major theme appearing: money, but not in the way most people expect. The reading shows money beginning to represent something different: freedom, choices, time, experiences, quality of life, possibilities. And once money becomes connected to freedom rather than simple accumulation, your mindset begins changing. You become more selective, more aware, more intentional. You start paying closer attention to where your energy is being invested, who contributes to your growth, who drains your energy, who adds value, who consumes resources without giving anything meaningful in return. And honestly, several answers begin appearing naturally, without investigation, without confrontation, without effort. Because the truth often reveals itself the moment we stop ignoring what we already know. There is also a specific person appearing in your energy, someone who begins triggering quiet suspicion. Nothing dramatic, nothing explosive, small inconsistencies, small contradictions, small behaviors that do not fully align with their words. And while Sagittarius is naturally trusting, once you begin noticing patterns, it becomes very difficult to ignore them. The spiritual message is simple: trust your intuition. Not everything needs immediate proof to be real. Sometimes your soul notices something long before your mind understands it. And honestly, respecting that intuition may save you from future disappointment. The chapter closes with a powerful realization. Not every door needs to remain open forever. Some doors are closing now, not as punishment, not as loss, but because larger opportunities are preparing to enter your life. And honestly, the next chapter looks much bigger than the last one. One of the things I admire most about Sagittarius is the ability to keep believing in the future, even after disappointment, even after loss, even after situations that would make many people give up. There is something inside you that continues looking forward. And honestly, that quality becomes one of your greatest strengths during this period. Because the reading shows a very important shift happening. You begin looking at your past differently, not with regret, not with resentment, with wisdom. There is a huge difference. The energy repeatedly shows you reviewing old experiences, old decisions, old relationships, old mistakes, old opportunities. But instead of focusing on what went wrong, you begin focusing on what was learned. And honestly, that changes everything, because there is a major difference between carrying wounds and carrying lessons. Wounds keep you stuck. Lessons help you grow. The reading shows many situations that once caused pain no longer holding the same power over you. Not because they never mattered, because you evolved, you matured, you survived, you learned, you became stronger. And now you are seeing life from a different perspective, a higher perspective, a wider perspective, a more conscious perspective. There is another fascinating realization emerging. Certain worries that once consumed your energy are beginning to lose their importance. Things that once kept you awake at night. Things that once felt overwhelming. Things that once seemed like the end of the world now appear much smaller. And honestly, that is not because life became easier. It is because you became stronger. The challenges may still exist, but your ability to handle them has increased dramatically. There is another powerful theme appearing. Purpose. The reading repeatedly shows Sagittarius moving closer to something that feels deeply aligned with their soul. Not necessarily a specific job, not necessarily a specific relationship, something bigger, alignment, the feeling that your mind, your heart, and your intuition are finally moving in the same direction. And honestly, that feeling is rare, but it appears strongly here. The reading shows a growing sense that you are approaching something meaningful, something important, something that feels like it belongs to your journey. There is also a very strong connection to learning, knowledge, expansion, discovery. And honestly, this fits your sign perfectly. The reading shows increased curiosity, a stronger desire to study, to research, to explore, to understand, to ask deeper questions. Subjects that previously seemed uninteresting may suddenly capture your attention. New ideas begin appearing, new perspectives begin opening, new possibilities begin emerging, and none of this is accidental. Because some of the answers you are seeking cannot be found through other people's experiences. They must be discovered through your own. There's another fascinating development happening spiritually. The reading does not show a sudden awakening, it shows deepening. Your questions become different, your reflections become deeper, your awareness becomes broader. You begin noticing things that once escaped your attention. Patterns, signs, connections, messages, and honestly, your soul is expanding, which makes perfect sense because Sagittarius was never meant to live trapped, not physically, not emotionally, not spiritually. There is also a person appearing strongly in your energy, someone you care about, someone whose potential you clearly see. But this person seems distracted by life, missing opportunities, losing focus, failing to act, repeating patterns, and the reading shows you trying to help, trying to guide, trying to encourage, trying to show them what they are unable to see. But there is a lesson here, a very important one. You can illuminate a path, but you cannot walk it for someone else. And honestly, accepting that truth creates peace, because some people only learn through their own experiences. No matter how much wisdom you offer, no matter how much guidance you provide, some lessons must be lived. Meanwhile, your own life begins accelerating, not chaotically, positively. The reading shows movement, doors opening, answers arriving, situations improving, opportunities appearing, momentum building. And perhaps the most beautiful part, you begin feeling progress again, because nothing energizes a Sagittarius more than growth. Nothing inspires a Sagittarius more than movement. Nothing restores a Sagittarius more than knowing they are moving towards something meaningful. The chapter closes with a powerful image. A Sagittarius who is no longer looking backward for answers. Someone whose eyes are fixed firmly on the horizon. Someone who can finally feel life moving again. And honestly, your soul has been waiting for that feeling. There is one word that keeps appearing over and over throughout your reading, deserving. And honestly, that word carries far more power than it seems. Because for a long time, your life has felt like a series of mountains. Every time you reached one goal, another challenge appeared. Every time you solved one problem, another responsibility arrived. Every time you thought you could finally rest, life demanded something else from you. And honestly, that kind of pressure creates exhaustion that most people never see. Not physical exhaustion, soul exhaustion, the exhaustion of constantly carrying something, constantly striving, constantly adapting, constantly moving forward. The reading shows exactly that energy, but now something begins changing. And surprisingly, the biggest change is not happening outside of you. It is happening inside. You begin realizing that you do not need to constantly prove your worth. Read that again, because this lesson becomes one of the most important themes of your month. You do not need to convince everyone. You do not need to justify every choice. You do not need to explain every dream. You do not need to earn the right to be yourself. And honestly, the moment this realization settles into your spirit, a tremendous weight begins lifting. There is another very powerful energy appearing. Authenticity. The reading shows Sagittarius becoming increasingly aligned with their true nature, and that matters more than people realize. Because whenever you spend too much time living according to other people's expectations, your soul becomes restless. When you remain in environments that no longer fit you, your soul becomes restless. When you suppress parts of who you are, your soul becomes restless. And honestly, that restlessness has been present for a while, but now it begins fading because you are moving closer to yourself again, closer to your truth, closer to your values, closer to your vision, closer to the future you genuinely want to build. There is another fascinating development appearing around work and opportunity. Something important is approaching, but it is not arriving dramatically, not with headlines, not with fireworks, not with obvious signs. It arrives quietly, subtly, almost hidden, and honestly, most people will overlook it. But not you, because one of Sagittarius's greatest gifts is seeing possibility where others see routine. The reading repeatedly shows an opportunity hiding inside something ordinary. A conversation, a connection, a project, an idea, a proposal, a piece of information, something that initially seems small, but carries enormous potential. The spiritual message is clear. Pay attention, because the opportunity you have been waiting for may arrive disguised as something simple. There is also a beautiful transformation happening in how you deal with difficult people. And honestly, this is a sign of maturity, because the reading shows that in the past, you often felt the need to make everyone understand your perspective, to explain yourself, to defend yourself, to prove your point. But now something changes. You become calmer, more strategic, more selective. You begin understanding something powerful. Not every battle deserves your energy. Not every criticism deserves your attention. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. And honestly, that realization creates enormous freedom, because maturity is not winning every argument. Maturity is knowing which arguments are not worth having. There is a specific person appearing here, someone complicated, someone difficult, someone who often creates tension, someone who sometimes seems determined to make situations harder than necessary. But the reading shows something interesting. This situation is not resolved through force. It is resolved through patience, through intelligence, through emotional balance. Because sometimes the strongest person in the room is not the loudest one. It is the person who remains calm while everyone else loses control. And honestly, you are learning exactly that lesson. There is another beautiful prediction appearing. Help is coming. Unexpected help, support, guidance, advice, a useful conversation, a helpful connection, an opportunity created by someone else's recommendation. The reading repeatedly shows assistance arriving when you need it most. And perhaps the most important message is this. You are not walking this path alone, even when the road feels long, even when progress feels slow. There are people appearing exactly where they are meant to. The chapter closes with a powerful image. A Sagittarius slowly recovering something incredibly valuable. Faith in the future, not blind optimism, not wishful thinking, real confidence, the confidence of someone who has survived storms before and knows they can survive whatever comes next. There is something very interesting happening now, While many people spend their lives focusing only on what is missing, you are beginning to notice what you have already built, And honestly, that changes everything, Because gratitude is not simply a positive emotion, it is a shift in perspective. And the reading shows that shift happening naturally. Sagittarius is a sign that lives facing the horizon. You are always thinking about the next goal, the next journey, the next opportunity, the next dream, the next chapter. And honestly, that is one of your greatest gifts. But it can also create a blind spot, because sometimes you move so quickly toward the future that you forget to recognize how far you have already come. The reading shows exactly that realization appearing. You begin looking backward, not with nostalgia, not with regret, with appreciation, because there are battles nobody saw, nights nobody witnessed, difficult decisions nobody had to make except you, moments where you almost gave up, moments where you kept going despite uncertainty, moments where you chose courage even while afraid. And honestly, those moments deserve recognition. There is another powerful energy appearing. Recognition, first internal, then external. This sequence is important because the reading repeatedly shows you learning to recognize your own value before seeking it from others. And once that happens, something changes. People begin recognizing it too. There is a very strong indication that others are paying more attention to your journey than you realize. The reading shows people observing you, learning from you, being inspired by you. And honestly, You may not even know it, because part of you still sees your life as ordinary, still sees your struggles as normal, still sees your victories as expected. But the truth is different. The reading shows people quietly admiring your resilience, your adaptability, your willingness to keep moving forward even without all the answers. And that inspires more people than you know. There is another fascinating development connected to finances. The energy here feels much clearer than before. Not necessarily because money suddenly arrives from nowhere, because your relationship with money begins changing. The reading repeatedly shows organization, awareness, strategy, planning. You begin paying closer attention to what strengthens your future, which habits support growth, which habits create setbacks, which relationships add value, which relationships create dependency. And honestly, this creates a feeling of control. Not control over everything, control over what actually belongs to you. And that distinction becomes very important. There is also a significant shift occurring in how you define success. The reading shows maturity developing, because in the past, there may have been moments where you felt pressure to achieve certain milestones quickly, pressure to prove yourself, pressure to keep up, pressure to arrive somewhere faster. But now something changes. You still want growth, you still want achievement, you still want expansion, but the anxiety surrounding those goals begins fading. You become more patient, more strategic, more trusting of timing. And honestly, that patience becomes one of your greatest advantages, because something meaningful is being built, and meaningful things take time. The image appearing repeatedly is that of a tree. A strong tree does not grow in a week. It develops roots first, strength first, structure first, then growth becomes visible. That is exactly what your life resembles right now. There is another beautiful prediction connected to your personal energy. People begin responding to you differently. Your words carry more weight. Your opinions gain more respect. Your presence becomes more noticeable. And honestly, the reason is simple. You begin believing in yourself more, not dramatically, naturally. And when Sagittarius believes in themselves, their energy becomes extremely powerful. There is another lesson appearing with incredible clarity. There is no limit for someone who never stops learning. And honestly, that sentence may summarize your entire path, because the reading repeatedly shows expansion, learning, discovery, growth, not through luck, not through shortcuts, through continuous evolution. The chapter closes with a powerful image, a Sagittarius standing on higher ground than before, looking out toward an even larger horizon, not because the journey is finished, because a new one is beginning. And this time, you are carrying far more wisdom than when you started. If there is one thing Sagittarius has always known how to do, it is start over, not instantly, not without pain, not without doubt, but eventually, you always find a way to rise again, and honestly. That strength becomes incredibly visible during this period, because the reading shows several pieces of your life finally beginning to fit together, not because luck suddenly appeared, not because all problems disappeared, because your perspective changed. And sometimes perspective changes everything. There is a very strong feeling of relief entering your energy. The kind of relief that comes when someone spends a long time searching for answers, only to realize the answers were much closer than expected. The reading repeatedly shows situations that once felt confusing becoming clearer, situations that once felt impossible becoming manageable, situations that once felt distant beginning to move closer. And honestly, this creates confidence. Real confidence, not based on certainty, based on experience, because you begin realizing that many obstacles were never as permanent as they seemed. There is another major shift happening around decision-making, and honestly, this may be one of the healthiest transformations in your reading. You become less impulsive, less anxious, less concerned with pleasing everyone, more concerned with alignment, more concerned with truth, more concerned with what genuinely serves your future, and that changes everything. Because one of the greatest prisons people experience is not physical. It is emotional, living according to expectations that do not belong to them, carrying dreams that belong to someone else, following paths that do not resonate with their soul. The reading shows you slowly freeing yourself from those pressures, not dramatically, not rebelliously, consciously, one choice at a time, one decision at a time, one realization at a time. There is another beautiful development appearing. Your intuition becomes stronger, much stronger. The signs become easier to recognize. The messages become easier to understand. The reading repeatedly shows increased awareness, dreams, coincidences, unexpected insights, moments of knowing without explanation, moments where something simply feels right or wrong. And honestly, the more you trust these signals, the more accurate they become. Because spiritual guidance rarely arrives through giant events. More often, it appears through small details, quiet moments, subtle feelings, simple observations. And the reading shows you becoming increasingly connected to those messages. There is also a very positive energy surrounding relationships, not only romantic relationships, human connections in general. The reading shows new friendships, new partnerships, new collaborations, new conversations, people who share similar goals, people who expand your perspective, people who encourage your growth. And honestly, this fits your sign perfectly because Sagittarius grows through experiences, through conversations, through discovery, through connection, through exposure to new ideas. And June repeatedly shows those opportunities appearing. There is another lesson emerging. You do not need to carry everything alone. Read that carefully, because the reading repeats it several times. For a long time, you accepted responsibilities that could have been shared. You solved problems that belonged to multiple people. You carried burdens that were never entirely yours. But now something changes. You begin allowing support, allowing cooperation, allowing help, allowing partnership. And honestly, that creates balance. A healthier balance than you have experienced in a while. There is another important prediction. Something you have been hoping for begins moving closer. A goal, a dream, a project, an opportunity, a possibility, something that once seemed very distant. The reading shows progress, not completion, progress. But enough progress to restore your hope, enough progress to remind you that movement is happening, enough progress to remind you that your efforts are not being wasted. And honestly, that may be exactly what your spirit needs right now, because the most beautiful energy surrounding this section is enthusiasm, the return of enthusiasm, the return of excitement, the return of curiosity, the return of inspiration. And when Sagittarius feels inspired again, everything changes. Colors seem brighter, possibilities seem larger. The future feels exciting again. And honestly, that is one of your natural states. The chapter closes with a powerful image. A Sagittarius standing at the beginning of a road that finally feels promising. Not because every question has been answered, because hope has returned. And hope is one of the strongest forms of momentum your soul can experience. There is a beautiful image appearing in your reading now. An image of someone standing at the edge of a cliff, looking toward the horizon. Not because they are lost, not because they are uncertain, because for the first time in a long while, they can see how far they have already come. And honestly, this realization becomes incredibly important because Sagittarius often focuses so intensely on the next destination that they forget to appreciate the distance already traveled, the next goal, the next dream, the next challenge, the next adventure, the next chapter. Your eyes naturally move forward, but June invites you to pause for a moment. Not to stop growing, not to stop dreaming, simply to recognize your progress. Because there are victories you never fully celebrated, obstacles you overcame without recognition, moments where you showed extraordinary strength without even realizing it. The reading repeatedly shows hidden accomplishments, quiet victories, private battles won, and honestly, those achievements matter more than you think. There is another powerful energy emerging, self-recognition. The reading shows a Sagittarius beginning to see themselves more clearly, not through other people's opinions, not through external validation, through personal awareness. You begin realizing how much you've learned, how much you've evolved, how much stronger you've become. And that awareness changes your relationship with yourself, because confidence built from self-awareness lasts much longer than confidence built from praise. There is another fascinating prediction appearing. People begin recognizing your value more openly. The reading shows your voice carrying greater influence, your ideas carrying greater weight, your presence becoming more noticeable. And honestly, this isn't because you changed dramatically. It is because you stopped hiding parts of yourself. The more authentic you become, the stronger your energy becomes. The more honest you become, the more magnetic you become. The reading repeatedly shows people responding positively to your confidence, not arrogance, authenticity. There is also a strong indication involving inspiration, and this may surprise you, because the reading shows people quietly learning from your example, watching how you handle challenges, watching how you continue moving forward, watching how you adapt, watching how you rebuild. And honestly, many of them never tell you. But your journey inspires more people than you realize, because one of Sagittarius' greatest gifts is courage, not the absence of fear, the willingness to continue despite fear. And that energy affects everyone around you. There is another important theme connected to finances: organization. Not restriction, not fear, organization. The reading shows increasing awareness around money, where resources are going, what investments make sense, what habits support long-term success. What habits quietly undermine it? And honestly, this awareness creates freedom because true financial confidence rarely comes from luck. It comes from clarity. The more clarity you gain, the more empowered you feel. There is also a fascinating shift happening around your definition of success. The reading shows maturity replacing urgency. For a long time, part of you felt pressure. Pressure to achieve quickly, pressure to reach milestones, pressure to prove yourself, pressure to keep moving faster. But now something changes. You begin trusting timing more, trusting process more, trusting your own path more. And honestly, that reduces an enormous amount of unnecessary stress because some dreams are not delayed. They are developing. Some goals are not stuck. They are growing roots. The image of the tree appears again. A tree becomes powerful because it grows patiently. And that same energy surrounds your life now. There is another beautiful prediction connected to your personal power. The reading shows you entering a phase where people feel your confidence. Not because you become louder, because you become more certain, more aligned, more focused, more connected to your purpose. And honestly, that energy is difficult to ignore. The chapter closes with a powerful image. A Sagittarius no longer measuring success by speed, no longer measuring growth by comparison, no longer measuring progress through other people's timelines. Instead, measuring life through alignment, purpose, growth, wisdom, and honestly, that mindset may become one of your greatest advantages in the months ahead. If there is one lesson that June continues teaching you, it is this: not every opportunity requires urgency. And honestly, that lesson may save you from unnecessary frustration. Because the reading shows a Sagittarius who is naturally wired for movement. When you see potential, you want to act. When you see possibility, you want to explore. When you feel inspired, you want to move immediately. And that energy is one of your greatest gifts. But sometimes it can also become a source of impatience. The reading repeatedly shows situations developing behind the scenes, not stalled, not blocked, developing. And there is a huge difference. Because lately there may have been moments where you wondered, why is this taking so long? Why isn't this moving faster? Why haven't I seen results yet? But the spiritual message remains consistent. Trust the process. Because several things that appear slow now are actually becoming stronger, more stable, more reliable, more sustainable. And honestly, future, you will be grateful for that. There is another fascinating theme appearing: confidence. Not the loud kind, not the performative kind, the quiet confidence that develops when someone finally stops seeking permission to pursue their own path. The reading shows you becoming increasingly independent in your thinking, less influenced by criticism, less influenced by fear, less influenced by people who project their limitations onto your dreams. And honestly, this changes everything because some of the people around you genuinely care about you, but they do not share your vision. They do not see what you see. They do not feel what you feel, and that's okay. The reading makes something very clear. You do not need universal agreement to follow your calling. You only need clarity. There is another strong prediction involving personal expansion. Travel appears repeatedly. Not necessarily international travel, movement, exploration, new places, new environments, new experiences. The reading shows your soul craving fresh energy, fresh perspectives, fresh conversations, fresh inspiration. And honestly, this is healthy because Sagittarius was never designed to grow through repetition alone. You grow through discovery, through experience, through expansion. And June repeatedly places opportunities for expansion directly in your path. There is also a beautiful shift happening around your social world. You begin attracting people who operate on a similar frequency. People who think bigger, dream bigger, see possibilities, take action. The reading shows conversations becoming more meaningful, more inspiring, more aligned with where your life is heading. And honestly, some of these connections may become extremely important later. There is another lesson appearing around control, or more specifically, the illusion of control, because the reading shows a Sagittarius learning something powerful. You do not need to control every outcome to create a successful future. You only need to control your effort, your attitude, your choices, your direction. Everything else unfolds through time. And honestly, that realization creates enormous peace because part of your recent stress came from trying to solve problems that did not yet exist, trying to predict outcomes that had not yet arrived, trying to manage situations before they even developed. Now the energy changes. You become more present, more focused, more grounded, and that improves everything. There is another fascinating indication involving recognition. The reading shows someone important noticing your efforts, a supervisor, a client, a mentor, a business contact, a person with influence. Someone begins paying attention to what you've been building. And honestly, this recognition feels deserved because it comes after a period where your work may have felt invisible. The spiritual message here is beautiful. Keep showing up, even when nobody is applauding. Keep building, even when progress feels slow. Keep believing, even when results are not yet visible, because much more is happening beneath the surface than you realize. The chapter closes with a powerful image, a Sagittarius walking confidently toward a horizon that once felt unreachable, not because the road became shorter, because your belief in yourself became stronger. And honestly, that belief may be the most valuable thing you gained this month. There is something extraordinary happening inside you now, and honestly, most people will never fully understand it, because from the outside, it may simply look like confidence, But the reading shows something much deeper, You are beginning to trust yourself again. Not blindly, not recklessly, wisely. The kind of trust that comes after surviving situations that once seemed impossible. The kind of trust that comes after making mistakes, learning lessons, and continuing forward anyway. And honestly, that trust changes everything, because there was a period where you questioned yourself more than usual, questioned your decisions, questioned your direction, questioned whether you were moving fast enough, questioned whether your efforts would truly pay off. But now something shifts. The reading repeatedly shows clarity replacing doubt, not because every answer suddenly appears, because your confidence grows stronger than your uncertainty. There is another powerful theme appearing: freedom. Not physical freedom, emotional freedom. The reading shows a Sagittarius slowly releasing old expectations, old pressures, old obligations, old versions of themselves. And honestly, this feels liberating, because some of the weight you've been carrying was never yours to begin with. Expectations from family, expectations from society, expectations from people who do not fully understand your vision. The reading shows you quietly separating your own dreams from everyone else's opinions, and that creates enormous peace. There is another fascinating prediction involving opportunity. Something that once seemed unavailable begins moving closer. A possibility, a project, a financial goal, a professional breakthrough, a personal achievement. The reading repeatedly shows momentum increasing, not overnight, not dramatically, steadily. And honestly, that is exactly the kind of growth that lasts. There is another strong indication involving your intuition. Your instincts become unusually accurate during this period. Pay attention to first impressions. Pay attention to recurring thoughts. Pay attention to subtle feelings, because the reading repeatedly shows your inner guidance becoming stronger. You begin sensing when something is right. You begin sensing when something is wrong. You begin noticing details that others overlook. And honestly, those instincts protect you. There is also a beautiful lesson connected to comparison. The reading shows you finally releasing the habit of measuring your life against someone else's timeline, because comparison has been creating unnecessary pressure. You look at other people's achievements, other people's progress, other people's success, and occasionally wonder whether you should be further ahead. But the spiritual message is very clear. Your path was never meant to look like theirs. Your journey is unique. Your timing is unique. Your lessons are unique. And honestly, the moment you fully accept that truth, life becomes much lighter. There is another major shift happening around relationships. Not necessarily romantic relationships, all relationships. The reading shows you becoming more selective about who receives your time and energy. Not colder, not distant, more intentional. You begin recognizing who truly supports your growth, who genuinely celebrates your victories, who contributes positively to your journey. And honestly, that awareness changes your entire social circle over time. There is also a strong prediction involving a conversation, an important one, a conversation that provides clarity, perspective, information, or an opportunity. The reading shows words carrying unusual importance. Pay attention to discussions that seem ordinary, because something meaningful may arrive disguised as a simple exchange. The chapter closes with a powerful image, a Sagittarius standing with complete confidence beneath an open sky. No longer asking for permission to dream bigger, no longer apologizing for wanting more, no longer shrinking their vision to make others comfortable. Instead, embracing expansion, embracing possibility, embracing the future. And honestly, that future looks much brighter than you currently realize. As this cycle begins approaching its conclusion, the reading reveals something incredibly important, Dot. And honestly, it may be the biggest transformation of your entire year, Dot, because for a long time, part of you believed that happiness existed somewhere in the future, Dot, somewhere beyond the next goal, Dot, the next achievement, the next breakthrough, the next destination. And while ambition has always been one of your strengths, June begins teaching a different lesson. The lesson is this: your life is happening now. Not someday, not when everything is perfect, not when every goal is achieved, now. And honestly, that realization changes your relationship with everything. The reading shows a Sagittarius beginning to appreciate the journey as much as the destination. You still want growth, you still want success, you still want expansion, but you stop postponing your happiness until some future milestone arrives. And that creates freedom, real freedom. The kind that comes when someone finally understands that fulfillment is not always waiting at the finish line. Sometimes it is found along the way. There is another powerful shift happening. You stop seeing certain delays as failures. This is important because several situations that frustrated you recently were never actually rejections. They were redirections. The reading repeatedly shows paths closing because better paths were opening, opportunities disappearing because larger opportunities were approaching, people leaving because they no longer matched where your life was heading. And honestly, you are beginning to see that now. What once felt like loss begins revealing itself as preparation. There is another beautiful prediction connected to prosperity, not just financial prosperity, life prosperity. The reading shows abundance expanding into multiple areas. Better opportunities, stronger connections, more confidence, greater clarity, improved emotional balance, a stronger sense of purpose. And honestly, all of these things become connected because when your inner world improves, your outer world often follows. There is another fascinating realization appearing. You begin understanding that success is not something you chase forever. It is something you gradually become. Read that again, because the reading repeats this lesson several times. For years, you may have felt as though success was always one step ahead, always slightly out of reach, always belonging to the future version of yourself. But June begins showing something different. You are already becoming the person capable of creating the life you desire. And honestly, that awareness changes your energy dramatically. There is another strong indication involving leadership. Whether you realize it or not, people are beginning to look toward you differently. The reading shows your influence increasing, your words carrying more authority, your example carrying more weight. And honestly, this happens because experience has transformed you. You are no longer operating from theory. You are operating from lived wisdom, and people respond to that. There is also a beautiful spiritual message appearing. Stop doubting your ability to adapt, because one of your greatest strengths has always been resilience, the ability to learn, the ability to adjust, the ability to keep moving, the ability to reinvent yourself when necessary. And honestly, that strength becomes extremely valuable during the months ahead because opportunities are coming. Changes are coming, expansion is coming, and adaptability will allow you to benefit from all of it. There is another prediction involving a long-term goal, something you've been building, planning, imagining, working toward. The reading shows progress becoming visible. Not necessarily complete success yet, but undeniable movement. Enough movement to remind you that your efforts matter. Enough movement to restore confidence. Enough movement to prove that the seeds you've planted are growing. And honestly, that may be exactly the encouragement your soul needs right now. The chapter closes with a powerful image. A Sagittarius standing on a mountain they once thought was impossible to climb, looking toward an even greater horizon, not with fear, not with doubt, with excitement, because for the first time in a very long while, you are no longer wondering if the future can be better. You are beginning to know it can. As this reading comes to its conclusion, there is one final message that rises above everything else. And honestly, it may be the most important message of your entire month, because after all the lessons, all the opportunities, all the growth, all the decisions, all the doubts, all the discoveries, and all the personal expansion, June is ultimately about one thing: believing in the size of your own future. The reading shows a Sagittarius standing at a very different place than where they began. Not because life suddenly became easy, not because every problem disappeared, not because every dream arrived overnight, because you changed. You became stronger, more patient, more strategic, more aware, more connected to your own truth. And honestly, that transformation changes everything. There is a phrase that appears repeatedly throughout this final chapter. You were never meant to live a small life. Read that again, because the reading emphasizes it over and over. You were not born to ignore your talents. You were not born to silence your dreams. You were not born to shrink your vision to make other people comfortable. You were not born to stay where your soul has already outgrown. And honestly, part of you has known this for a very long time. The restlessness you felt, the desire for more, the urge to expand, the feeling that something bigger was waiting. None of that was random. It was your soul reminding you who you are. There is another beautiful realization emerging. You stop seeing your dreams as unrealistic. You stop seeing your goals as distant. You stop seeing your future as something reserved for other people. The reading shows a Sagittarius beginning to claim their own potential, not arrogantly, confidently, because there is a huge difference. You begin understanding that success is not something reserved for a lucky few. Growth is not something reserved for other people. Abundance is not something reserved for someone else. You are allowed to desire more. You are allowed to dream bigger. You are allowed to build a life that excites you. And honestly, that permission changes everything. There is also a powerful spiritual message surrounding intuition. The guidance that has been quietly growing throughout the month becomes stronger. The reading shows you noticing signs, recognizing opportunities, understanding timing, feeling the difference between fear and intuition. And honestly, that awareness becomes one of your greatest advantages, because Sagittarius has always been guided by something larger than logic alone. A vision, a feeling, a calling. And June strengthens that connection. There is another beautiful prediction involving the months ahead. The seeds you have been planting begin showing results, some quickly, some gradually, some unexpectedly. But movement appears everywhere. Professional growth, financial growth, personal growth, spiritual growth, emotional growth. And honestly, the most beautiful part is that none of it happens by accident. You earned it through persistence, through resilience, through refusing to quit, through continuing even when you couldn't see immediate results. There is also a final lesson that appears with extraordinary clarity. Stop waiting until everything is perfect before allowing yourself to feel proud, because perfection is not the goal. Progress is. And the reading shows tremendous progress, far more than you currently recognize. You have survived things that once terrified you. You have overcome situations that once felt impossible. You have grown through experiences that could have broken you. And honestly, that deserves recognition. The final image surrounding your reading is beautiful. A Sagittarius standing beneath an endless sky, looking toward the horizon. Not because they are searching anymore, because they are ready for growth, ready for opportunity, ready for expansion, ready for the next chapter, ready to trust themselves, ready to believe in their future, and perhaps most importantly, ready to stop asking whether they deserve something bigger, because deep inside they finally know the answer. They always did. The future ahead is not asking you to become someone else. It is asking you to become fully yourself. And honestly, that is where the real magic begins.